All
you.
right. Well, Neil, thank you. Thank you, Innovate New Albany. Thank you, new friends and old friends. I mean, we see faces in the crowd that we recognize. And of course, many members of our team are here today, too. So thanks for indulging us today to talk a little bit more. I believe the title of our talk today was all about becoming a championship city. And the person that is synonymous with that is Linda Logan. And so today we're going to focus on Linda and let her share her story, which really starts with a love and passion of sports. So Linda, talk a little bit about where did that come from? How did that happen?
So I've been a Cleveland Indians, now Guardians fan since I was 10 years old, and that was in the good old days when they weren't very good. So I think that really sparked something in me. I remember going to my very first game and walking out into my seat and seeing that big, beautiful green field, and it honestly changed my life. I'm from a very small town, Fairport Harbor, if anyone's from Lake County. Population 3,000. When I was in high school, we didn't really have girls' sports that was organized sports yet. Title IX had already happened, but it was underway. And if you've ever seen me run, that probably wasn't the path to take for me as a student athlete. But I was the high school sports editor of our high school. I was a statistician for the boys team. And I had the good fortune of going to Ohio University that had the very first sports administration program in the country. So I was a communications major, ended up going into that master's program that really just opened so many doors for me, and here I am.
I love that seeing an event firsthand really is maybe what inspired you, all these years later. So you've spent most of your professional life here in Columbus. But you came to Columbus from Kansas City. Even though you're an Ohio girl,
yes,
you came from Kansas City. So what drove you? I mean, what drove you to come to Columbus, but what excited you also about being here?
So I talked about Ohio University. I went and did an internship with the Milwaukee Does of the Women's Professional Basketball League. If you want to look up that logo for those designers in the room, it would be politically incorrect now, but take a look at it because we'll be laughing about that for many, many years to come. But then I went to Kansas City and I had this great opportunity. Kansas City at one time had an NHL team, an NBA team. Of course, we know the Chiefs and the Royals, and college basketball was king there. The NCAA was headquartered there. They had more Final Fours than any city in America. So I got to see firsthand what these big events did for Kansas City. They had one of the very first sports commissions. And my sister still lives in Columbus. She just had her second son. So Patrick, who lives in New Albany, by the way, he's a Columbus police officer. And Luke is a Columbus firefighter. My sister said to me, "Don't you want your nephews to know you better?" So for those of you that are sort of looking at jobs or thinking about jobs, I took a leap of faith. I took a leave of absence from my job at the Kansas City Convention Center, moved to Columbus with no job, living with these two little ones and my sister and her husband, and waited tables at the Funny Bone, and also sold retail at Abercrombie & Fitch when it was a lot different store. And all my friends in Kansas City were taking bets as to when I was going to come back. I think it was just one of those leaps of faith where I was kind of in a rut in Kansas City. Columbus was certainly not the city that we now know it is, but I was able to get a job at our convention center when it was under construction, took a job there in sales. I wasn't even a salesperson, I thought. I was a great operations behind the scenes person, but I was able to get some of my groups to Columbus, mostly on the convention side, but my big calling was I booked the MAC basketball tournament for Columbus in Little Battelle Hall that sat 6,000 people, and that's where I saw we could do this in Columbus, right? We need to have an organized effort like what is now the Sports Commission. Right. But I was really inspired by what I had seen in Kansas City, coming to this new city where people let you pull up a chair, and that's kind of how it began.
So was that the tipping point? Was getting the MAC tournament, or because you spent at least 5 years leading the sports market then for the organization that we now know as Experience Columbus,
yes,
which is sports tourism. They lead tourism for Columbus. We lead the sports arm. But was that the tipping point? Talk about that tipping point.
That really did inspire me to see how this community was, what they were built of, if you will. And I was working for the building, and I was tugging on people's shoulders of anybody that would listen. We really should start a sports commission. What's a sports commission? Do you all know what a sports commission is? Think of us as sports tourism. We're measured on three things: economic development, raising the image of Columbus through sports, and then that quality of life of doing great things for Columbus. So I wrote a business plan while working at the convention center and was hired as a staff of one at Experience Columbus to really incubate that sports effort. And it took about 5 years as a salesperson that handled all different markets. I know Celia will talk when we get to questions about handling the religious market, handling the sports market, but we were a staff of one competing against Indianapolis that had the Indiana Sports Corp with a staff of 30. So how could we then launch it from there? And it took really a lot of people coming together, whether it was Ohio State, Nationwide, several other leaders that said, okay, this might work here, that funded us and got us off the ground.
Break that down a little bit more. Talk about those steps that it took to get the initiative, the creation of the Sports Commission off the ground. You just mentioned relationships and people that wanted to invest in this idea and this concept, but break that down. What did that look like?
So Andy Geiger was the athletic director at Ohio State, and Andy had come from Stanford, and he had been on the men's basketball committee for many, many years, and he knew that the communities that really had their act together, like a Kansas City or an Indianapolis or a San Antonio, they had the combination of the town and the gown working together. So Andy knew that it couldn't just be Ohio State going out and bidding on these things. I mean, Ohio State, you have to have them in your corner or else it's a big white elephant in the room. So having him walking through those doors with you, trying to get the initial funding was magical. I mentioned I was a behind the scenes person, but all of a sudden I'm going into offices with John Wolf, the president of the Dispatch, and just having Andy Geiger at our side was amazing. Doug Kreidler, who you may know, who runs the Columbus Foundation, at the time he was the president of Kappa, which owns all the theaters here, but he was the president of the board of Experience Columbus back then. And actually, he just took that helm again. He's now the current president of the board at Experience Columbus. But he saw the work I was doing, and our president at the time left the organization, so we didn't have a president. So he got a little bit more in the weeds with the staff, and he saw some of the work that we were doing as a staff of one, and I was able to do a benchmarking project for him that said, imagine if we're just one person right now, but all these 10 other cities have really invested in sports commissions. And from those of you from the not-for-profit world, he helped us write a case statement for funding. So now we're talking about the year 2002, where I was originally hired in 97. Now it's 2002. It's taken us that long to get the funding and get off the ground. And I was just sharing our case statement with Milwaukee and Birmingham. I think there's about 6 or 7 sports commissions around the country that have looked at our model, looked at our bylaws, and really sort of mimicked the work that we do. They've customized it to their community, but it was fun to read something that was written so long ago, and almost every single thing in that case statement has come true, of all the successes, all the great facilities that have come on board, all the big events that we've been able to host, all these new hotel properties that have come on board to make us one of the, we're the 15th largest city in the country, but to see that what we projected could happen and how we got people excited in investing in us, they've come to pass. Now, we couldn't rest on our laurels, and it was really important for us to deliver time and time again, and we still have that. Like our goals have gotten higher, and it's just been exciting to see how the city has grown and how the community has grown and how we've grown up right next to them.
Talk a little bit more about some of those successes, some of the things, especially early on. What were some things that really maybe gave some momentum to this initiative? And I say that in the spirit of thinking about many of the folks that are in the audience today that are starting new businesses just this weekend.
Yes.
That momentum is so important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think relationships are so important in our business, and it's just like all businesses. People want to trust you. They want you to be in the trenches with them. And oftentimes, these events that come to our city, that's their fundraiser, right? Whether it's USA Volleyball hosting an event. We had the USA Fencing National Championships here last summer, and they had 6,000 fencers. That is their big moneymaker of the year. Obviously, they're trying to win gold medals and do all these other things, but the bottom line is they want to have successful events. So I feel like in the early days, it really was, which Columbus are you? Columbus, Georgia, Columbia. I remember somebody said, what are you, Columbia, Missouri? I'm like, no, Columbus, Ohio. Like, we were just not known nationally. And there's still some amazing data that maybe another Tiger talk sometime would be with maybe Experience Columbus and Sarah Towns and the work she's doing as the Chief Marketing Officer, because she has amazing data on inside of Ohio, people know Columbus really well, but outside of Columbus, because of our lack of budgets at times, only 14% know about our destination. So that's on the meetings and convention side. So I think early on it was waving that flag of Columbus and then just being available, and then slowly but surely adding these great facilities. You know, Berliner Park, we say it's the largest softball complex in the world, and no one's ever corrected us, right? So I don't know if we don't know about anything else outside of North America, but even just that facility alone brings a lot of dollars into this community. We've hosted more volleyball tournaments than just about any city in America at our convention center. It might not make the sports page, but I think in those early days it was that participation sports that maybe kept the lights on, kept the doors open. And I think that's still our bread and butter. I mean, when we talk a little bit about what's in the pipeline, that's a big part of it. And if you don't know this, but we are actually, one of our KPIs is hotel room nights. We actually have a quota that gets higher and higher each year based on the fact that we have to either have signed contracts or have a great way to be able to qualify the groups that come to the city. So some of those events are in the year, for the year, but we're working on groups now for like 2031. So I think most people would be surprised to know how long that sales process often is.
So early successes being, it sounds like in the vein of, gosh, really capitalizing on those participatory sports, building those relationships, the fencings, the individual sports, things like that. Is there an opportunity where you feel like things didn't go the way you wanted them to? Maybe, where there was a failure or just a stumbling block.
Yes.
You talked about the reputation of Columbus, at least initially,
yes,
being a challenge, but was there anything else that you stumbled on and had to learn and grow from?
I think there were a couple things I can mention. Probably 15 years ago, we brought a USA Track and Field event. Awesome event, but no spectators. And I would say that the national governing body themselves probably just didn't have good data. It was a fabulous event, by the way, but nobody came. And maybe they knew that, but we didn't know that, and we probably underestimated what the reach would be and how many hotel rooms it would be. And would we do it again? We might think about it. We'll probably talk a little bit about bidding on the Women's Final Four and a little later in the program, or whenever you're ready for that. But when we first bid on that, we didn't get it the first time, and that there's a bigger story there. So oftentimes, we have to bid maybe more than once for people to understand what the footprint looks like, what our facilities look like. Once we get people here, once they've experienced Columbus, we get them back. Like, our retention is awesome. But I think it was some of those early tales, if you will.
Yeah, learning from the event.
Learning curves.
Live and
yes.
learn.
Yes.
Live and learn. Well, so you've grown the Sports Commission in every way. We're going to talk here in a little bit. Yes, our book of business. So the types of events that we host now, the amount of economic impact that has on our community has exploded. Certainly our operating budget, our staffing, even though we're a small but mighty team, has grown over the years. Still staying with those early years and thinking about staffing. You were a staff of one. Suddenly now you're getting some momentum. You're able to grow the staff a little bit. I can only imagine myself thinking, I need everybody to come and help me.
Where do you go next?
Yeah, but what was that process for determining what positions to add and who you added next?
So I coming from the events operations side, I personally felt like we had to go there next. So you can book as many things as you want, but if it doesn't happen where you're going to be holding their hand and making sure that they're successful, so that's where we turn next. So Jason is a great representative of being kind of the Columbus way of under promising, over delivering. We say that we roll out the red carpet and we cut through the red tape, and that is so true. I think that's our mantra. You'll see a stat that we are in the top 10 for Sports Business Journal of hosting sporting events. And in large part is because we've had that philosophy probably since day one. So adding an events person, adding a second events person, knowing that we needed a fundraiser, right? Knowing that we obviously, I kind of was the salesperson initially, but knowing that that business development hat was so important to be able to go out there and tell our story each and every day, because the competition is fierce. Our national association, it's called Sports ETA, the Sports Tourism and Events Association. There's hundreds of cities that are represented, large and small, and some have a lot of resources and some don't. So in those early days, it was important for us to talk about the St. Louis's and the Kansas Cities and the Clevelands and all the cities, that the Nashvilles, the Indianapolis, again, we talked about them. Just that it's always good to tell that story that, hey, we're trying to compete, but even within our state, we're not, we don't have the funding for it. So those are all things that came to play, I think.
That's great. That's great. So in your tenure, Columbus has now hosted more than 1,250, I would say, unique events.
Yes.
Pretty significant. Tell us about some of the ones that fly under the radar, some of the maybe lesser known that are some of your favorites.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the fencing. Don Anthony is the Ohio State fencing coach, and he was the president of USA Fencing. His predecessor, Vladimir Nuzlomov, was a gold medalist from the Soviet Union that really in the early days walked arm in arm with us through the front door of USA Fencing. Oftentimes it takes that local champion that can help you open doors, and then you get people here, and then you can then influence. USA Volleyball, I mentioned being a volleyball capital. Bob Price was the commissioner of the Ohio Valley region of USA Volleyball for probably 30 years, lives here in Westerville, taught at Westerville South. And because they have the second largest membership in the country, over 27,000 people play volleyball in our region. And so arm in arm with Bob Price and Ron Wyszynski, we have worked magic. I mean, it still gives me goosebumps when I think about sort of the first time we got them into our convention center. It was a hard hat tour, and we were able to make this work. I remember sort of telling the story, like, maybe we could become that Midwestern hub, and we would have to wrestle that away from a Kansas City, or even Austin was doing a lot in that space. But when we've hosted now the NCAA volleyball championships on the highest scale ever, women's volleyball is just exploding, and I think all of us take a lot of pride that it started out very small, grew, and now it's very mighty. And women's sports in particular, we're going to talk more about that. So those things have really been very rewarding. Our national association, we've hosted board members here. We've hosted national conventions here. Just 2 weeks ago, we hosted the Teams Conference. We had 1,300 people here. That included 400 of current customers, potential customers. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee had their meetings here as well. So how about that, to have them in your own backyard? The weather was beautiful. The Buckeyes were on the road, so we had the big opening party at the stadium. And a lot of people had never been to Columbus before. So it's just always having to provide that first impression. I think that's what we're charged with most of the time. And so it's exciting to see how one visit can turn into two, or Celia might be talking to somebody with a USA Badminton, and all of a sudden they might bring their event here just because they've had a great experience. And sometimes it takes one person, or sometimes it takes hosting a conference like that where everything works at the same time, right?
That's fantastic. We're going to talk about a larger event. We're going to talk about the NCAA Women's Basketball Final Four.
Yeah.
And there's a great story that's involved in this event. And
Yes.
so many of you might know we had the great fortune, Columbus had the great fortune of hosting Women's Basketball Final Four in 2018, and we are set to host again in 2027. But there's a lot that went on behind the scenes to get to this
Yes.
point.
Yes.
You've called it a formative event for Columbus.
Yes.
So
Kind of a
share
defining
little-
moment. You asked about
So
those.
share the background, the
backstory,
road
yes.
to how we got to the Women's Final Four,
So-
and even what that event is today, because
Yes,
it's incredible.
growing. So if any of you know Brian Ellis, he's the president of Nationwide Realty, and he's one of our very own, the only board member that's been with us all 24 years, I think, or 23. So he'll say that was the defining moment for our organization, that really, the loss. So we bid on the 2012, 13, 14 Women's Final Four back in 2008. And we thought we had it in the bag, so to speak. We crossed all the T's, we dotted all the I's. We had to raise $2.5 million. So did the other cities, by the way. But we actually had commitments in hand. And for those of you that don't know, oftentimes you are buying the privilege of hosting these events. So we had to raise those dollars. And some states like Florida and Texas, they can write one check. but we had to get everybody's buy-in. We had to get about 30 organizations to help us raise those dollars. But so we thought we have signed pledges here, right? But at the end of the day, it was before the Hilton downtown was built, and we were going to have to put people everywhere. We just didn't have the right hotel package. So I feel like that loss ended up being the biggest win because we lost the bid. We lost the bid. And I think there were so many people invested in it that it hurt, right? But it also hurt in a good way because all of a sudden people realized, because there was talk of building a 1,000-room hotel, but we just didn't have momentum. So between us and Experience Columbus, we were able to do all these lost business reports, but it's a lot sexier to say that NHL is not going to come unless you built the Hilton, or the Women's Final Four than to say the U.S. Conference of Engineers is not coming. No disrespect to the engineers, but it's just a different story that you're telling. So all of a sudden, I think it bubbled up to the front burner, and we built this new hotel, and we started checking all the boxes. We, Experience Columbus and the Sports Commission, started getting more dollars, so we went from a staff of 4 to a staff of 12 in a very short period of time. And when you can increase your resources, all of you know as business owners, your productivity is going to go, it should go, right? It should go straight up. And that's what happened to us. We were able to do so much more, and the rest is history. We hosted arguably one of the best women's Final Four ever. Even on that night, we had 3 buzzer beaters. Again, the weather was beautiful, things you can't control, but take credit for. And all of a sudden, the ESPN talent said, best Final Four ever. When are we coming back to Columbus? And Mayor Ginther still references that it was a great night to go to sleep as mayor of Columbus that night, knowing, and I think just because of those successes, we were the first city to treat them the way that the men were treated. We did the bus wraps and the red carpet arrivals, and this was our Super Bowl, so we were able to take that $2.5 million and pay for a lot of things. That's what you're doing, is you're actually paying to put on that event, right? So in that case, they wanted to come back as soon as they could. We had COVID in there, so our next opportunity now is 2027, and we have to up our game. I mean, we can't rest on our laurels, so we are raising $3.6 million this time, and we take big and small donations. But you know, it is a pride point because it went so well, and I think people started we had more of a swagger after that, I think, right?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that story. Staying with Women's Final Four and really some of our other events, there's a great amount of community collaboration that goes on in and around these events. So yes, some of the work might start with the Sports Commission, our partners, whether it be the Blue Jackets, the crew, or even just the facility staffs themselves to bid with Celia and team on the events. But then when we go to host, or when we're prepping to host, we really lean into our community and say, how do we show off the best of Columbus?
Yeah,
Talk
so
about that.
make it our own,
Yes.
right? So every city has a zoo and really nice restaurants. And so I talked a little bit about our team and our philosophy of just doing what it takes to make those events successful. But I think it's also important we also are responsible for selling tickets. I mean, not just us, but let's say Nationwide Arena, whether it's the NCAA or USA Figure Skating, you're putting your neck out there a little bit that it's going to be successful. So I think it's really important to engage the community. You all might not know that behind the scenes, we have financial risk. We're a small organization. Our cash reserves are good for a size company like ours, but we have our budgets like $3.5 million, so we don't have all that in the bank to lose a lot either, right? And I'm happy to say in all of our years, we've never even had to go into our cash reserves, or we have a line of credit, of course, but we are reliant on our local communities to show up, and it is something that's a pride point because you don't want to have an empty arena. We've been to events where there's been empty arenas, and maybe USA Figure Skating would be a great example of that. It took us almost 20 years to get that event here as well. I started talking to them a long time ago as a staff of 1, and slowly but surely we started going to those events. And the arena was not sure if they wanted to host it and send the team on the road. They were already sending the team on the road for other things like Disney on Ice, or things that make money for the building. So it really took some doing with Mike Gatto became the general manager of Nationwide. I think he went with us to Nashville and to Detroit and to San Jose. But we didn't have buy-in right away. So even though we thought the event might work in Columbus, we needed our partners to believe that. So in 2019, the U.S. Figure Skating Championships were in Detroit. So we took a bus of stakeholders. We left at 8 in the morning. We got everybody back by 5. And so in the middle, we had county, people from the county, from the city, from the Blue Jackets, all the people that we needed buy-in for, because in order to host that event, not only do we have to sell a lot of tickets, but we needed some outside dollars. We needed about $1 million to offset we had to raise a total of $2.8 million to host that event. So 1.8 in ticket sales, $1 million in outside support. But oh my gosh, it was the gift that keeps on giving. But to Dawn's point, we wanted to make it Columbus. They didn't have those 27,000 volleyball players to come to a championship and buy tickets. Figure skating is not a known sport that a lot of people are figure skating themselves. So how can we generate interest? So we started out at the Pride Parade, and we had an Olympian roller skating with us at the Pride Parade to launch the ticket sales. We brought Brian Boitano and Jason Brown to Columbus, and they were being a chef or guest bartenders. But then we started working with the Columbus College of Art and Design and paired them up with a class there and one of their alumni. So they designed a costume for Isabel Levito, the silver medalist, that not only did she wear that costume in Columbus, but she wore it in Japan, and it had 40,000 rhinestones. Again, we were just telling that Columbus story. The Columbus Metropolitan Library was celebrating their 150th anniversary, and they leaned in and they came back to us. We said, what can we do together? They created Sockefeller Center, which is a slip and slide rink inside the main library. We had 2 book signings, one with Nancy Kerrigan, where over 1,000 people signed up to hear about her book. Gracie Gold was another figure skater that had a mental health a book that she had come up with, maybe 200 or 300 people. So we were trying to attract the entire Columbus community. You might not be a sports fan, you might not even be a figure skating fan, but you might be interested because it's touching you in a way that maybe you hadn't thought of before. There was a mother at the library that came to the library staff and said, my children have sickle cell and they've never been able to ice skate outside before. So this has been amazing for us. Can you do this again? So those were some of the touches. The symphony paired up with us, and Jason Brown skated live to the Columbus Symphony on that Sunday night.
Still gives me goosebumps.
Yes, and that came about. Really, you should tell that story a little bit. But
well, that was a fun. Brian Boitano and Jason Brown came to Columbus in August of that year to help us to begin promoting the championships, and we had a nice happy hour opportunity for many of our stakeholders to meet Brian and Jason, and our friends from the symphony were there, and Jason and our friends from the symphony really hit it off. And Jason says, "Oh, by the way, I've skated live to another symphony in another city. It'd be great to do that here in Columbus." And as Linda and I are bystanders watching and listening to this conversation and
thinking about the dollar signs,
thinking about the dollar signs, the logistics, wondering how all of that would come to life, and yes, panicking in that moment because they're both like, "This is a great idea. We're going to make this happen," and they made it happen, and we made it happen, and or helped to facilitate it, and it was amazing.
Awesome.
So.
And Mike Gatto, the arena manager, was standing right there, so we brought him over.
Yes, it was amazing.
It was magic, really.
The collaborations that we do with the community in that way. Back to one of the earlier comments. Yes, band kids and sports come together very, very well. They integrate very well, and we are very proud of that because we like to show off Columbus and the ways in which we can bring the business community, the arts community, whomever it is, into the event. And I think that's been a really great signature to the work that we do. And I think I'd ask you that question. What do you feel like has been what flipped the switch for Columbus, who maybe once, as you were getting us started, once being maybe a little bit of an underdog when it came to hosting events, to now being on the short list?
Yeah, I think I remember us bidding on the Frozen Four, which is the Final Four for college hockey. And I remember my friend from San Jose was like, "Oh, Lynn, just don't give us that underdog. I know that you guys are as formidable as anyone, right? So I think just having those opportunities, and we're bidding against some of the largest cities in the country, so we shouldn't apologize that we don't have an NFL team or we don't have what everyone else has. But the makeup here, I think, the crew, the crew almost leaving and staying, like all those stories talk about maybe the Columbus way and the compassion of the community and how this is a special place. And I just think that the more we can showcase that, the better. I mean, we get to go, I feel like we have some of the best jobs in the world because we get to go and have a courtside seat to all these events around the country. And we can see when cities just do an okay job. And you never want that to be us, right?
Right.
So I think there's a couple of those.
And you'll see on one of the slides that's coming through, we were rated as a top 10 best sports host city. And that's by Sports Business Journal, which is an industry publication that we highly value. And they don't do that every year. They don't do that ranking every year.
Right.
So that was coming off of 24.
We're the reigning top 10.
And we are only one of 2 non-NFL cities in that top 10. So you think about there are other NFL cities that aren't even on the list. So,
There's a lot of bragging rights.
There's a lot of bragging rights.
We talked about Indianapolis, so I'll give you a great example. I think it took a while for us to really orchestrate the experience with the hotels and the restaurants for them to understand the importance of tourism, and sports tourism in particular. Because before our convention center expanded, we didn't have the footprint to get the big events, right? But slowly but surely. So Indianapolis, I'll go back to them. They were ahead of their time with bringing everybody together. And I'll remember that my husband had some business in Indianapolis, and I always knew that the restaurants and the hotels got it, like why tourism was important to them. But I had gone to Mass that day, and the priest had said, "Welcome, XYZ group. I know you're sitting in my pews today." I'm like, damn it! Even the priest gets in here. Like that's kind of a bummer. Like I'm sure that in Columbus, our priests downtown don't know what events are happening in the city. But honestly, that was an eye opener for us to continue to orchestrate that experience because I'm sure they got extra dollars that day, right? But it was true that not only did the hospitality community get it, but you needed the buy-in from the corporate community. Our public officials are so awesome here. We are so fortunate. The county, the city, the state, everybody plays nice. In this world of people being polarized, I would say Columbus, that Columbus way of everybody's grasping hands and trying to do things together. So I tell that Indianapolis story to say that I feel like we got that now, that it's happening. We can tell that people appreciate the power of the visitors, and these events mean a lot for community pride. If you remember when Mayor Coleman was in office, he wanted us to have more swagger. We were always sort of that Midwestern shy, and it is still our Midwestern values, but it's okay to be able to be a little cockier about the stuff that we're doing because we are doing great things. And when they came out with that list of 10, I think that the only 2 sports commissions mentioned were the Indiana Sports Corp and ours, right? So there was a point of pride of like, hey, I think we're there, we're getting there. But again, not resting on our laurels.
Talk a little bit, let's just kind of shift back to management perspective. We've grown as a commission, as an organization, doing great things here in the city, and we're so proud, of not only being on your team, but following your leadership to do all of those things. Talk a little bit about, though, the concept of doing big things with a little, with little resources. We joke we're a small but mighty team.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think that we are. Somebody called us scrappy the other day, and I thought that was probably very accurate. Or the other term, this sports term about punching above our weight, because we do a lot, and it can be exhausting. Like we own and operate 2 events, and that's not easy. And we're out, Celia and her team are out traveling at every trade show, sales. So I think we've been able to show the value of, if you give us $1, we're going to give you 14 back, because it's important that the power of tourism, we're here to create and generate not only the hotel tax, but I think our stats are, and we work with Experience Columbus on this all the time, is that for every dollar you give us, I talked about the 14 back, but then every household saves about $1,500 in taxes because of the work that we do and that those outside dollars that we bring to Columbus, so, or Greater Columbus for that matter. So it is important. Now we have one of the highest hotel taxes in the country, but our rates are still very affordable. So it all comes out in the wash, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to make sure we talk about a really important initiative that is out there that the Sports Commission has been tapped to help support, and that's working alongside of Mayor Ginther, First Lady Shannon Ginther, and their desire and his statement to make Columbus the nation's capital for girls and women in sports. So can you tell a little bit about the background of
Sure.
the ramp up of that initiative and even a little bit about where we are now?
Yes. So being the Sports Commission early on, I noticed that we have a lot of women's sports here. We don't have the WNBA, and we of course have our Columbus Fury now, but Ohio State has really invested in women's sports. So 36 varsity sports. There's very few colleges that have women's hockey, and they've really invested in it. So I recognized early on, whether it was Andy Geiger or Gene Smith or really now Ross Bjork, but we've invested there. And we had been winning, like there's some of our sports teams were winning national championships, and even our state championships from Central Ohio are doing so well. I know New Albany's had some great state champions in recent times. So I just wanted to say that I recognized that early on. So we created an event, I don't know, about a dozen more years ago called the Women's Sports Report. And how it happened is I was at a Christmas party, and at the time, Otterbine's women's soccer team and Ohio State's women's soccer team were going to their Final Four for the very first time. And so I mentioned that to Barbara Fergus, who's a local philanthropist, and she says, "Linda, I guarantee you're the only person in the room that knows that." And it was true. Like, I thought about how it was football season, how football was king here, of course. So I went home for the holidays and came back and said, we should create an event to shine the light on these two teams, some of our state champions. So we created this women's sports report, and I think 350 people came. We were at a ballroom in one of the hotels on campus, and we had to stop selling tickets because we had no idea there would be such interest. So it has grown. I think we had about 800 people when we stopped doing it during COVID, but we were bringing in, the year we hosted NCAA volleyball, we brought in Carrie Walsh-Jennings, the Olympian, and we were Maria Taylor came in, and we had some big names that would help us tell that story. Now, because of COVID, I felt like it was risky to do it. Are we going to lose money? As a taxing on our staff, but we're going to bring it back in 2027. But I think that, along with the fact that we were hosting or bidding on women's Final Four, women's national volleyball championships, which, by the way, they're both coming back for 2027. So that's kind of the background. So the mayor brought his daughter, who was maybe 7 or 8, to the women's Final Four. She had no interest in sports. But seeing those buzzer beaters, she went home and said, "Dad, I want to play basketball." So Clara Ginther started playing basketball. The mayor was her coach. So then 2 or 3 years later, she went to the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championships. Again, sellout crowds, record, close matches. She's like, "Dad, I think I want to switch to volleyball." Now she is a freshman in high school. She's on a premier team. So they have seen, he and Shannon Ginther have seen how their daughter, how self-esteem, all the traits that sports does for girls. So they approached us a year and a half ago and said, "What can we do? How could we make Columbus that best city in America?" And we were doing it before it was trendy. It was before the Caitlin Clark stuff. And so I feel like we've had a little bit of a jump ahead. But he does not, he wants us, of course, to bid on all these events and have other girls have those same opportunities. But he also wants us to look at the college students that are already here. There's about 1,000 women playing college sports here. How can we retain that talent? How can we find mentoring opportunities? How can we find a pipeline for them to stay here and make their lives here? So that's not part of our day job initially. So we are learning kind of kind of drinking out of a fire hose for some of it, but he has put up dollars for the next 3 years to do a lot of research. We hired Wasserman, which is an international company. The collective is doing some great research for us, and we're going to be rolling out more in the first quarter of next year about what some of those initiatives are, because there's probably 20 of them, and we have to boil them down. We're still a staff of 13 taking on a second job, if you will, but it's important. It's important for not only the people that we know and those events that we bring to our city, but for our livelihood. And I think that it's going to be important.
It's going to be really special.
Yeah.
It's a generational project.
Generational project that we
Yes.
can be part of.
So we're just getting it started. But-
So I'll give you a great example. So I always like to brag on Celia. So Celia played college basketball at Arkansas and moved to Columbus. She was recruited to Columbus to work at Experience Columbus. We traded for her, right, to come over to the...
There was a draft.
There was a draft. But her daughter now plays college basketball at Harvard, by the way, right? How about that? And so just knowing what sports, to see it firsthand through her eyes, it's been fun for me as the non-athlete. I love sports, but I always like to brag on Celia and Gabby just because it's quite a story, right? So more people like Celia need to stay in Columbus.
Well, Linda and I were joking as we were starting today, or just before we started today, that she and I have talked through many of these things, but typically there's a bottle of wine in front of us. And, so we've shared that idea with Neil moving forward, that, maybe that's a way to approach the Tiger Talk and Tiger Tales.
Time for the Q&A? Yeah, there we go.
Oh, well done.
Well, and it's a good one.
Crack
How
it
about
open.
that?